So we decided not to have church services in the main building with all the people this weekend. And what was kind of the reasoning for that, would you say?
Well, the term social distancing, they're saying that large crowds probably should be avoided. That's why Disney World closed, major sporting events closed, and we just think it's being responsible to say, we are a large crowd, but we're really going to suffer a crisis. What do we do with all those donut holes? That
was the first thing to go. The first thing that we talked about was, if we're going to have church this weekend, we definitely should get rid of the donut holes.
Well, we're thinking about maybe just having people just open their mouth and drop them in like little birds.
Yeah.
That way they'd be safe.
That's a great idea.
Go back and I did some looking through for worry because that was going to be my theme this weekend. And there are several passages that are in the Bible about anxiety and fear and worry. So worry is not something that just came around. It's been around, a part of humanity from the beginning. So, and for example, in Matthew it says, I tell you, don't be anxious about your life, a good word. What you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you put on, is life, not more than food. And I think that's a good point. And he says, look at the birds of the air, they neither sow nor reap and gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. So in other words, the point is, don't get so anxious about the things that you get anxious about. And we all worry from time to time. And we all suffer anxiety at different levels, even though I'm really not an anxious person, but there are things that concern me, and there are things that trouble me when they don't go my way. But I just don't let my life be enveloped in that. So when you heard this initially, what was your first thoughts? Did you have any first thoughts? What'd you do?
Panic immediately. As is my nature. It's funny, you being my dad, and you're the great minimizer. You're the one that always has a kind of a fresh perspective to things, and you come in and say, well, let's not get too upset too quickly. I don't think you've ever really dealt with generalized anxiety or anything like that. But I'm definitely on the other end of the road on that one. So yeah, immediately I was like, oh, this is something I don't want to start to worry about. This is months ago that I heard about it. And I was definitely worried immediately. And I think it's come in waves. And I think it's done that for a lot of people where it's become, I'm super anxious, I'm super worried, this is going to be the end of everything, to, well, this isn't a big deal, comparing it with the flu, all of that kind of stuff. Right. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, but I think a lot of it too is we don't know what the future holds. And every day we kind of get up and we act like tomorrow's going to happen just the same way that it happened the day before. And when this happens, what we feel is very out of control and very fragile and very finite. And I think that's where a lot of people, maybe they haven't ever dealt with their own mortality before, or right. Looking into the future and thinking, wow, things may not be exactly what I planned them to be. This is going to change my business. This is going to change my relationship. I think there's so many of those things that are going through people's minds maybe for the first time, or maybe for the first time in a while.
Right.
And me being one of those people. And I think that in a lot of ways, that is a healthy thing to kind of hash out. I think going through that process of that worry and that anxiety can take you into a really bad place that isn't helpful. But I think that in the same way, it can take you into an even better place that is helpful. It helps you gain perspective. It helps you develop and really appreciate the time that you have right now and the things that are going on right now.
So part of this relationship, father-son, to where I minimize things and you don't, you're probably on the other extreme, but it's kind of fun to be together because there's a balance that sometimes I'm too much of a minimalist. Don't worry about it. Right. But I should be maybe a little more concerned than I am.
Right.
And I may pull you away from that edge and you may pull me away from the edge, which sometimes the middle is I'd say often the middle is the right place to be.
Everything in moderation to a certain, even worry.
Yeah.
To have no worry is not a good place to be.
Well, and it's part of the human structure. For example, Matthew 6, don't be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And then there's Luke where it says, which of you or whom of you who worry can add a single hour to their life? So you get these stories. And then Paul, he writes in Philippians, Don't be anxious about anything, but pray about everything. And here's a guy that's in prison. Do you think Paul felt any anxiety? But he's talking to guys outside. Why is there so much biblical truths or stories about worry? Because it's part of who we are.
Right.
So maybe yesterday or several months ago, I was just living in, hey, everything's great. But the reality is, none of us know what can happen tomorrow.
Right.
But the word threat is part of the word. When we all of a sudden there's a threat that we didn't see before.
Right.
And maybe if we didn't know about it, we'd be fine.
Right.
But because we do know about it, we
Right.
feel threatened.
Well, I think we're, especially my generation is one that's real interested in comfort and control. We like to stay in more than we like to go out now. We like to be online and communicate through our phones more than we like to get together in person to a certain extent. Or at least there's we have that option now, which
Right.
we never did before. And that brings about a lot of comfort, a lot of air conditioning time, and a lot of couch time, and a lot of those kinds of things. And we don't deal with as much discomfort as probably a few generations before us did. And in a lot of ways, I mean, you see anxiety on the rise, and that's been a thing for the last few years. And it's, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of research that shows this. It's due to the fact that we are built to run from predators. It wasn't that long ago that we were running from tigers and having to pick our own food and
Right.
hunt our own food and run and chase and sweat and all of that. And now we're at a place where everything's so good all the time that anything that happens that would cause us any amount of stress or anxiety or anything like that is just magnified. At what point does the worry stop being beneficial? Is there an amount of worry that's beneficial? And then what's the line? Where do we stop and say, okay, that's enough, and all of this is extraneous?
No, I think that's a good question. And I don't know that anyone has the answer to that as far as what balance there is. But I do go back to these ancient texts where Paul says, hey, guys, don't be anxious about anything. But,
He says anything.
anything. And in everything,
Well, there's Paul using absolutes, which
I know.
you're
I
the
know.
guy that's always against.
See, I call it the anything, everything syndrome. Don't get worried about anything, but in everything, give thanks. And I think there is something to be said about realizing my place of gratitude. For example, if we could say, I've lived a good life. I mean, general perspective. I've seen my kids grow up, that they're all successful. My life is good. So I'm so grateful. And if I focus on the gratitude and the progress of where my life is, the unknown future is not nearly as daunting. It's when my life is incomplete, or when I'm frustrated, or I'm always trying to be something that I'm not, that I think we could follow into more worry and anxiety and a fear-based type thing. But I love to pull people out of fear, and I think that when they are grateful, I think there's a joy that can come in the midst of difficulty. And, of course, I've studied a lot about theodicy, which is, where is God when bad things happen? And some people, I'm sure someone today is, this is God's curse on the world. And I totally reject that. That just could not be more damaging for me. But where is God in the midst of this whole thing? I would say the disciples were saying the same thing in the boat. Don't you care if we drown? The storm blew up on them. He goes, look, guys, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And here's what I believe. I believe that God is with us in some fashion every day, that my monologue that tells me to be afraid and listen to the media and I just get all these things going in my head, if I can take a moment and in meditation or prayer and reflection, see the scope of my life, I think it'll help me cope better, and it can help our people cope better. So I think these truths that are in the Bible are something that are very therapeutic for us. So, and helpful. So I go back, and these things have been around for thousands of years, and they have some good truth. So if we can apply those standards without getting panicked, I think that we'll be better off overall.
Yeah.
But that still does not mean that if I panic, I have no faith. I don't think there's a God, because I think we all fall into that from time to time.
Well, and there's just a certain amount of what's your personality type, how are you, what are you like? And if you're like me, in a lot of ways, more anxious type, you're just going to be anxious about it to a certain extent.
So because you're that type, that doesn't mean you're less spiritual or less.
Well, that's
Or-
I'm less spiritual for other reasons.
I understand.
Not because of the anxiety.
Yeah. I used to have someone that said, I remember this very bold, boisterous person was talking to someone, to Tim, and said, "Oh, I wish I could be like her. She's so sweet and nice and Christ-like." And I just looked around and go, we all have our issues. The sweet, quiet, Christ-like people sometimes may be kicked in the butt to where they begin to do something because they sit around and they're overly passive.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're more spiritual if you're aggressive or passive. I think it's just endemic of built into all of us.
Well, this is why, in the Bible, it seems like the church is referred to as a body. We need all these different pieces to come together to be functional.
Right.
And to be something that's more than what we are just individually. You need both aspects. If you just had the one, we wouldn't be in a good place. And if we just had the other, we wouldn't be in a good place. And it's always searching for that balance. It's always searching for that dialogue. Mm-hmm. One of the things that you said is, we continue to have this monologue that's playing in our head. And even Chase talked about this a few weekends ago, how he just has this constant monologue going through his head that's not necessarily healthy. And one of the things that you can do is start to open up and have an actual dialogue about this, to say, okay, I'm rather than just saying this inside of my head, getting stuck in this loop of unhealthy thought process or talk, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to sit down with someone that knows me, cares about me, and I'm going to have a good dialogue and get some balance.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've found really helpful with a couple of my friends, Alex and Mike, they're both very level-headed and both very different than me. And so a lot of times when I would find myself too far on the anxious path, I would call Alex. And then when I was finding myself too much on the minimizing path, I would call Mike. And they kind of would pull me back to center. Mm-hmm. So I do think that saying these things, having a conversation, talking about this with someone, it's definitely helped me as an anxious person.
Right.
And maybe getting out of just that internal monologue and getting into some actual dialogue would be good from a distance.
No, and it's okay to be minimalistic, say, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. But maybe a little better way to say, it will be okay. We may go through a season to where, the airlines lose money and the stock market loses money and the cruise, all the cruise ships are parked, and go, okay, but guess what? I'm going to get up tomorrow. I'm going to breathe in, breathe out, have a cup of coffee, and my life is going to be really pretty good. And what it helped me to do is go in to say, while I'm in this whole situation, maybe it's time that I can work on doing something for others.
Right.
And, just one of those things, clean out the closet, get some stuff together for Mothers Helping Mothers at Remnant Cafe, and do something positive. So the focus is not on my fear, but it's on what can I do to those. I'm fortunate. Yeah. As most who are listening to this, you're fortunate. But what can we do to help those that are less fortunate? And I think that when we care for others, the worry becomes less about me, and it becomes a different perspective, and I lose it in my busyness in serving in some capacity.
I think that's so true. I mean, one of the things that I found in being anxious about things is that often when I'm the most anxious is when I'm the most focused on myself and I don't have anything else going on. Mm-hmm. But when I have some other thing that I'm helping with, or something that I'm involved in, or some project going on or whatever, my energy goes into that, and it becomes less inward focused about what's bad in my life or what bad could happen in my life or inevitably will go wrong in my life. Like, all of those things kind of change when I have something else to focus on. But it's tough in this situation because, this is one of those times where you're talking about social distancing.
Right.
And so how can you be effective for someone like Mothers Helping Mothers or Remnant or anything like that if you're supposed to stay away from crowds, if you're supposed to stay away from social gatherings?
Well, I think that you can clean out your closet and drop stuff off at the Remnant Cafe or Mothers Helping Mothers. I mean, we have a drop-off center here on our campus without having to get in the crowd. It's something you can do by yourself and make a difference in someone's life. Jesus said at one point, come to me, all you who are weary and overwhelmed, and you can find rest. And it's about perspective and focus. And tomorrow you may fall off the wagon again. You come back again.
Well,
keep coming back.
That's exactly it. I mean, it's inevitable for me that I will be anxious about this.
Right.
But it's that daily, continual, even the verse of take every thought captive. You have to really, you can't allow that narrative that's going through your head to rule your life.
Right.
You can change that narrative. And one of the things that I've done in your whole go from a monologue to a dialogue, and not being at church this weekend, so a lot of the dialogue that maybe people have throughout the week won't happen there, but you can always call someone.
Right.
I feel like I've called people more this week just in driving or when I have some spare time, and that's been so helpful to call a friend and just say, hey, let's chat, and bounce some ideas off rather than just allowing that craziness to spin in your head.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. Well, I hope this is beneficial to everyone. We're going to make this to where you can watch it and maybe want to watch it again. We appreciate you doing that. But we do want to give you some takeaways. One is turn your monologue into a dialogue. When you do that, beware, because you might find yourself in a position of serving. And thirdly, begin to give thanks for all the good things in your life. It helps you keep your focus. It helps me keep my focus when I do that. So I have a story for you. Yesterday, I got back on campus. I'd been in North Florida for a day visiting my cousin. And I came back into campus, and as I drove through, the campus looks great. And I drove all around almost to the exit, the main exit of the campus where the park is, and I saw a guy on a bicycle. And he's talking on the phone on the bike, and he's carrying a little Publix bag of trash. And he drives up to the gate. It doesn't open, so he just takes and throws it over the top. And he didn't hit the dumpster, from my perspective. And I'm sitting in my car just looking at this guy, and I'm going, unbelievable. This is what I'm thinking. Unbelievable. This guy would come in and take his trash and throw it over the dumpster. Keep your own trash. So I sat in my car looking at him, and I was just kind of shaking my head like this, just a little bit annoyed. And the guy rides up to me on the bicycle, and I'm still looking at him like this. And he goes, hey, I picked that up on your property. It's your trash. I'm just trying to do you a favor. I said, oh, and he drove off. I got in my car. He drove all the way around the campus. I drove all the way back around and met him on the side, and I held my hand up, and I kind of went like this. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. And he said, no problem. Thanks for letting me ride my bike. But here's my point. Isn't it amazing how perspective can shift in just that fast? Just in a moment, I'm annoyed, I'm a little frustrated, maybe it's everything that's going on, and I see a guy, I make an assumption of what he's doing, and it was the wrong assumption. But when I get the information, all of a sudden I go, oh, gratitude, thanks. Today, you may be annoyed and shaking your head, but I want you to know that if you just trust God, trust your heart, everything's going to be okay. He loves you. So do I. Thanks for watching.